The second studio album from the experimental noise industrial hip-hop trio of Daveed Diggs, William Houston and Jonathan Snipes, known collectively as Clippin', sees the three return 2 years after their critically acclaimed debut album, which was pretty much agreed across the board that it was not only one of the best projects of 2014, but one of the best hip-hop albums of that year as well. Manic, glitchy, erratic sounds along with the more minimalistic, sparse sounds coupled with graphic, startling and enthralling imagery concocted through Diggs' lyrics and add an impressive flow to boot. Whatever was going to come next from the group was definitely going to be met with a strong amount of intrigue and was definitely going to be one that many a music critic would go in to delve into. And despite initial response being less than complimentary, here's looking at you in particular, Pitchfork, this new album, entitled Splendor and Misery, was not only a complete left hook out of nowhere, but it matches, if not betters, their debut in spades. Unlike the previous project, this album has a very unique USP to it. It's essentially a mini-opera set in the distant future, telling the tale of a human slave who is only recognised by the name Cargo 2331, escapes from their captors and travels in solitude to find refuge and escape from a life condemned to being enslaved by their computerised masters. What results is an odd, rather disjointed sounding album that is really intriguing, imaginative and unlike anything to come out this year. The narrative kicks off with the track The Breach, which clocks in at not even 1 minute in length, where the onboard computer details the moments where the character of Cargo breaks free from their bindings and makes their escape, bypassing all the security put into place and commandeers an escape ship and makes their way out into the wide vastness of deepest space. All Black continues with the stolen ship's AI computer observing her captors' actions and gathers together their reasons for resorting to doing what they did, ultimately coming to admire Cargo for their actions, and despite suffering from the first signs of doubt and uncertainty, the AI begins to develop human-like emotions for this person and vows to protect them from anyone who tries to prevent Cargo from their travels. Interlude number 1 then switches perspectives to Cargo, who rabbles off about not wanting to become another zombie to their would-be slavers and that was their primary motivation for escaping. Wake Up goes back to the AI, who now stresses her concerns over the chances of Cargo finding an inhabitable planet or anywhere that contains humanity of any kind, and the would-be slave himself knows this. So to pass the time quickly, Cargo begins their first stretch of hypersleep in order to calm their apprehension, although Cargo is clearly pondering these notions during their slumber. Skipping forward to Interlude 3, where Cargo seems to exude more confidence now, feeling a sense of security and comfort that no one's going to bring them any harm. Yet these emotions dissipate in the following track, Break the Glass, where the loneliness is now starting to get to them, beg for the AI to acknowledge their existence, and even threatens to take drastic measures in order to be recognised, i.e. breaking the escape ship's glass and ending their life. The penultimate track, Baby Don't Sleep, reads as the AI having enough of Cargo's bullshit and gives them a dose of tough love, deterring them from going back into hypersleep and descending even further into their loneliness and depression, and to not be content with just floating in space for all eternity and instead reinvigorate their desire to find humanity. And the final track, A Better Place, sees Cargo finally coming to terms with their predicament, deciding not to allow their despondency to get the better of them or allow themselves to question whether they've made the right decision or whether they'll find some form of salvation, and chooses to continue their venture into deep space, welcoming whatever lies in wait for them. So that's the album's narrative, but what about the instrumentation and production? Well, on the whole, this had the potential to split listeners down the middle because it's definitely a sparse project, but then again, it makes sense considering the subject material, and overall it works a lot of the time. The harsh and abrasive introduction to the album puts me in the mind of a space shuttle in the process of leaving Earth to begin its journey, made all the more effective with the low droning synths added to the track's heaviness. The Breach with its rather spacious sounds creating a desolate, bleak atmosphere which it continues into All Black, only including randomised computer effects, glitches and almost silent synth lines in the undercurrent. The tension created could be cut with a knife, it really puts the listener on edge. True Believer creates one of the more heavier sounds with the constant metallic stomps and scratchy glitches. Break the Glass introduces heavy kick drums with the continuous loops of air pressure chambers reopening and heavy warping synth lines. Baby Don't Sleep is a collection of rough screeches, low rumbles, drones, and what can only be described as someone emptying an entire box of random contents out onto the floor. It's the only way I can really describe it. Story 5 stands out, probably above every other track, as the only a cappella song on the album, and it is beautiful. Although this track doesn't play into the album's narrative, it actually comes off as one of this album's best songs, but I think my favourite instrumentation goes to the album's closer, opening up on a bright and vibrant church organ which I find very theatrical, a low synth bass with plenty of bounce to it, a skittering metronome sound and electronic drum beat that all comes together nicely honestly, before the outro becomes this cacophonous sound of harsh synths and static cascading together to end a pretty terrific project. Arguably one of this year's most memorable, ambitious and off-the-wall projects this year. Splendor and Misery encapsulates so many elements of its namesake, all the while creating some highly addictive and intriguing sounds that are unusual, yet are completely apropos to this album's narrative. There are a few moments where this album does slip along the way, namely the interludes, which, whilst they do fit the album's mould and are indeed clever, it does make deciphering the lyrics somewhat arduous. The instrumentals can often be a little jarring and does at some points feel like throwing magnets at the fridge just randomly. Some tracks do feel like they don't fit the album's narrative, which does offset the album, but only to a degree. And not being the biggest sci-fi geek on the planet, there are definitely a handful of references linked to the sci-fi genre that went completely over my head. But on the whole, I defy anyone to not be at least somewhat intrigued and have a modicum of admiration for the trio undertaking something that's completely out there. This album has definitely put itself on a plinth that a vast majority of albums could only dream to have done, and I have a great deal of admiration for this album. The group and my intrigue in future clipping projects is going to be undeniable from here on out. Overall, I score this album an 85 out of 100.